Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Lainey Rose Reiser, and I am the events coordinator here at East City Bookshop. It is a delight to be with you all this evening. Thank you so much for joining us both in person and virtually through our live stream. We love the accessibility that virtual events provide, and we are also delighted to be able to welcome so many of you back to the store to participate face-to-face. First up, some housekeeping details. Number one, we appreciate you wearing your mask while you're seated at the event and in the signing line. Masks are optional while shopping and browsing, but we've elected to continue to ask for them while we're seated closely together for an extended period of time. So thank you for doing your part. Number two, if you need a restroom, it's upstairs past the cash registers and the greeting cards. Number three, if you are watching from home and experiencing any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat. My colleague Emma is monitoring that to help if necessary. Number four, we will have time for questions tonight, both in person and virtual attendees. So even if you're watching via Zoom, you can participate. Please put those questions in the Q&A feature so that Emma will see them and can ask on your behalf. And also in the chat feature, let us know where you're streaming in from. Let us know that you're excited about the book. We want to hear from you. And finally, and most importantly, if you need to purchase a copy of A Scatter of Light, we have copies available and we'll be happy to help you out. All the copies that are in the store have already been signed, but we will have a personalization signing line after the Q&A portion. And now the reason we're here. The first Malinda Lo book I ever bought was called Huntress, and I bought it at a time in my life when I was desperately trying to get my hands on any sapphic literature I could find. And like many of us, Last Night at the Telegraph Club completely rocked my world, leaving me with a beautiful ache in my chest and a better understanding of our past. Malinda Lo writes in such a way that gives us a safe place to engage with queer history, to learn and grow alongside the characters she writes. In her newest novel, Aria Tang West was looking forward to a summer on Martha's Vineyard with her best friends, one last round of sand and sun before college. But after a graduation party goes wrong, Aria's parents exile her to California to stay with her grandmother, artist Joan West. Aria expects boredom, but what she finds is Steph Nichols, her grandmother's gardener. Soon, Aria is second-guessing who she is and what she wants to be, and a summer that once seemed lost becomes unforgettable for Aria, her family, and the working-class queer community Steph introduces her to. It's the kind of summer that changes a life forever. Almost 60 years after the end of the Last Night at the Telegraph Club, A Scatter of Light offers a glimpse into Lily and Cass' lives since 1955. Joining us tonight for the celebration of this novel is the one and only Malinda Lo, who is a best-selling and critically acclaimed author of several young adult novels, including the most recently Last Night at the Telegraph Club. Her novel, Ash, a lesbian retelling of Cinderella, was a finalist for the William C. Morris YA Debut Award, the Andre Norton Award for YA Science Fiction and Fantasy, the Mythopoeic Fantasy Award, and was a Kirkus Best Book for Children and Teens. She has been a three-time finalist for the Lambda Literary Award. Malinda's nonfiction has been published in the New York Times Book Review, NPR, the Huffington Post, The Toast, The Horn Book, and in many anthologies. She lives in Massachusetts with her wife. And also with us this evening is another East City Bookshop friend and shop favorite. Ellen O is a former adjunct college professor and a lawyer with an insatiable curiosity for ancient Asian history. She was an award-winning author of the middle grade novels Finding Junie Kim, The Dragon Egg Princess, and the Spirit Hunters Trilogy, and the YA fantasy trilogy, The Fantasy Series. The Prophecy series. She is also the editor of the middle grade anthology Flying Lessons and Other Stories and the YA anthology A Thousand Beginnings and Endings. Ellen is a founding member of We Need Diverse Books, a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing diversity in children's literature. Originally from New York City, Ellen lives in Rockville, Maryland with her husband, 3 children, 2 dogs, and has yet to satisfy her quest for a decent bagel. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and please welcome our authors of the evening.
Hello. Now you can hear me better. I love seeing people that I know. It's just great. Just had to say that.
Hello. I shall now sing for you. Then everybody will leave. Okay. It's so nice to see a big crowd here.
Yes. Thank you for coming, because I know Ellen, as Ellen tweeted right before we got here, Celeste Ang is also here tonight. So thank you for coming to my event.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, Celeste, we grabbed them here. So this is great. I have to tell you, Melinda's my friend, and also I'm a big fan of Melinda's. I'm kind of sitting here wanting to just stroke her, but I don't want to get, charged with like harassment or something. But seriously, later after dinner, I will just be like, Melinda. Scatter of Light is just beautiful. I'm just gonna just jump right in. Scatter of Light. I sat and read this in one sitting, guys. I did not move. My butt hurt so much. And then I was really hungry because In-N-Out burgers, oh my gosh. Like, this book is not like like Telegraph. It's not at all like it, and yet it has that connection, right? I just want to start right off the bat because I know people are like, oh, it's a companion book. It's a companion book. And I kind of just want to throw that out. I wouldn't really describe it as a companion book. So tell us about it from your words. Why it's not, well, if you agree, it's not quite a companion book.
Well, I think it is a companion novel because
I'm wrong again.
It's because I know more things than you about
This is true.
other things that I cannot say anything about.
Many, many more things.
So I mean, you can definitely read this without having read Telegraph Club. I think your Telegraph Club reading experience will be better if you read Telegraph Club first and then you read this, because this will answer some questions that you have at the end of Telegraph Club. So I will say that. It's definitely not like it's not a sequel necessarily.
But it makes you so happy. So like, I think that this is a book you absolutely have to read after Telegraph, because does anybody need closure? Like, are you the type of people? Yes, this will give you the closure you want. While it rips you apart with a dagger in your heart on the way, it's just beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you, Ellen, for that wonderful visual. I can tell that you're a writer.
You're welcome. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start with this. Whenever I do school events, I usually get kids that ask me, are these characters written about me or my family or people that I hate? Usually it's people that I hate, and then I torture them right now. No, so I want to ask that question of you, because I mean, it's such a character-driven book in a lot of ways. Any of you and your friends and your families and enemies in here?
Well, this book is definitely in many ways a book about friendship, and that's one of the reasons it is dedicated to 8 of my best friends, one of whom is here tonight. If she would like to have a cameo, she can. She doesn't have to. I have had this wonderful group of friends since I was in college, and they've gone through my life with me, and I really put that love for friendship into this book. It's really about Arya coming to understand what her true friends are. It's about her discovering another group of friends and being invited into that queer community. So this book is also about this. It's kind of inspired by the queer community that I found when I was living in San Francisco in the early 2000s. And there is one person who is directly in this book. And that is in the prologue, the first chapter. The artist, Sarah Franco, is basically my friend, Sarah Pecora, and who I told her, I was like, I actually put you in this book. Is that okay? Do you want to name yourself? So she chose the name for Sarah Franco, and that is my friend Sarah. So in a way that has never happened before. I've never put someone directly into my book, but I put her in the book. And so that was really fun. A lot of the characters, like Mel, are kind of amalgamations of friends that I have. So there's definitely no one who's directly one-to-one except for Sarah Franco. But I think that as a writer, I think a lot of times people think that what you're writing is autobiographical, and so you take your experience and put it directly into the book. For me, that's totally fine. But for me, I think it's about me trying to put myself in a fictional character's shoes. So I'm trying to get to know who Aria is an experience which she's going through my imagination. So it's about getting to know them. And then I will take aspects of my experiences and use them in various ways. So for example, Aria and her grandmother Joan have a really close relationship. And I also had a very close relationship with my paternal grandmother. I loved her so much, and she was a huge influence on me. But she would be the first to tell you, she's passed away in 2006, but she would be the first to tell you that she is nothing like Joan. She would not want that comparison. So they're not the same, but the relationship that they have was certainly inspired by the feeling that I had for my grandmother.
And I think that shows. I think it's the love that you have that shows in this relationship, because I know I love Joan. I really love her. So it that I think that is kind of seeing you as author bring that alive in the characters. Now, another thing that I think you also bring alive is the fact that Arya is biracial like you are. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and those experiences?
Yeah. Thank you. I did want to talk about that because I read this article the other day in New York Magazine. It was an analysis of the way biracial Asian and white people are represented in fiction. And I read the article and I was so surprised because it calls out all these themes that are in these books, and it analyzes them. And it was so interesting because I realized I do all of that in this book, A Scatter of Light. Aria is biracial. She's Chinese and white. I'm also biracial, even though I look Chinese. My paternal grandmother was a white woman. So I'm like 3/4 Chinese and 1/4 white. And in America, everyone thinks I'm just Chinese. But it was interesting that when I was in China, they would see me and they would know you're mixed. So it's very interesting. I think that in America, I grew up in a very white community in Colorado. And I think I have always, because of my white grandmother's influence, felt biracial in the ways that a lot of biracial people feel. But because I look Asian, that biracial aspect has never really been able to be publicly expressed or acknowledged. So it was very interesting to me that all of those themes were kind of subconsciously put in this book. I did not realize that at all.
But it's funny because if we talk about biracial people, there are those who are white passing, those who are very Asian. I mean, it is a huge mix. I mean, my niece and nephew, when I walk out with them, nobody thinks that they're related to me, and they're half Korean, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that experience of being kind of split with your culture.
Yeah, and not always seen,
Mhm.
right? Like some people see you and some people don't, but the wholeness of your identity is not seen consistently. And that is something that Aria struggles with in this book, particularly in the relationship with her mother, who is 100% Chinese. And I think that her difficult relationship with her mother in many ways is an expression of her relationship with being biracial.
Interesting. I can pick up on that. See,
Yeah.
this is a book where you learn things as you go too. I'm going to say what I'm going to say, but first I have to ask this question. I love Aria. I see her story as a very important coming of age story, and it was really eye-opening for me. I would say that I considered it messy and authentic, beautiful and raw. See, I told you I was going to say. And I feel like you didn't hold anything back at all, right?
No.
Tell us about experiencing that writing. Like I know when I was writing stuff that was pretty raw for me, it was hard. It was the hardest experience of my life. How was it for you? I mean, this is writing emotional,
I think it goes so writing for me is very much heavily about revision, so when I write a first draft, I often feel like I'm pouring all my emotions into the scene, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so terrible, or it's so great, and I feel really connected to it. And then I go back and read it, or my editor will read it, and he'll be like, can you bring this out a little more? I didn't really understand what you meant. So the thing is, when I'm feeling all these big feelings writing in a draft the first time, I'm feeling them, but I'm not putting them on the page necessarily. So revision means going back and focusing on what I really want the reader to feel. And that means magnifying certain things, increasing certain kinds of drama, centering other things. And so by the time I have revised the book, and this book went through 7 drafts over 9 years, by the time I get to the end of that, I don't feel the feelings anymore. I have become distant enough from the scene, and I have to become distant so that I can accurately assess whether the reader will be devastated enough by reading that scene. So,
Yes. I love that we get to know that she actually doesn't write perfect first drafts.
oh my God,
right?
they're terrible. They're
Thank
so
goodness.
bad.
Yes, because I don't. I mean, if you can't write a first shitty draft, you are not a friend of mine, right? But you know what? This is a great time to talk about this like long, protracted publication process that you had to getting this book out.
Yeah, it took me a long time. So you just heard me say 7 drafts over 9 years. So this book is set in 2013, and it's set in 2013 because that's when I first started writing it. Okay, it was supposed to be a contemporary novel at the time. But when it went out on submission in 2014, it was rejected by basically everybody. It got like 24 rejections, and it was very hard, let me tell you, to get rejected so much. But it was even harder because some of the rejections felt homophobic to me. At the time, okay, you gotta think back. Okay, I want to say some of the rejections were lovely, and they were like, the writing is so beautiful, but they were very uncomfortable with the sexuality in the book, because this is a book about coming of age, coming out, sexual desire. That stuff is in the story. It has to be on the page for the reader to understand what's happening. And several editors were really uncomfortable with it. They couldn't handle it. And I want to take you back to 2014 in publishing time, which was only 7, 6, 8 years ago, but it was like a lifetime ago because it was before We Need Diverse Books was founded by Ellen
and company, a lot of people.
Yes, and other people. And so back then there were very few LGBTYA books. I used to keep all these statistics. I stopped because it was just overwhelming. But in 2013, only 29 LGBTYA books were published by mainstream publishers.
And to add to that statistic, which I looked up just for you,
Oh, thank you.
in 2013, only 18 were about an Asian character.
18 out of all books. So not even queer, just in general.
Yes.
So there was very few of these books. So you have a queer Asian character, and editors are like, I don't know what to do with this. No one's going to read this book. So now in 2022, that's the year, right? It's so different. This year, there are hundreds of books about LGBT characters in YA, hundreds. And I don't know how many books about Asian characters.
It's still
not hundreds, but a lot more, a lot more. So it's way more open now. And so this book has changed a lot since I first started writing it. But those love scenes that made people uncomfortable back then are still in the book. They're almost identical to what they were back then. Maybe there's one more even. So I'm very, very glad that things have changed so that this book could be published now.
Okay. All right. I'm going to digress for a second because you brought the love scenes. So we're going to talk about the love scenes, right? Because they were nice and hot. I wasn't uncomfortable at all. I mean, I might have gotten hot, but like
You're an adult, a mature person.
Oh, this is true. I'm a mature. So I'm not actually. I giggle like when I'm writing sex scenes. This is why I don't do YA. I giggle like a little kid. I'm like, I get all red. I mean, like I have a hard time writing it, but I love to read it. Like, how is writing these sex scenes just so natural and just come on? I mean, you brought.
Oh my God, it's like
she brought it up. So
it's the most unnatural thing ever. I mean,
write about it.
I mean, these scenes are probably the ones I spent the most time on of all. Like literally looking at every single word many, many, many times. And you know what? That they did not feel sexy to me. Okay. It's like you read it that many times, you're like, does this word really need to be there? What word would be the best word to use for this thing? I mean, it's like it's very analytical after a while. Like you because you're trying to evoke a feeling in the reader, but in order to do that, you have to be distant from it. It's like you have to be able to step back and see how it might read for other people.
It was beautiful because there's no turgid in it. And I've always found the word turgid to be really off-putting. I mean, like you're in a sex scene, you want to feel like the sexy, and then it's turgid. I'm like, not at all. So this, it was lovely. I have to say, I commend you on your love scenes.
Thank you, Ellen. I really appreciate it.
All right. Going back to
They're
the
not
whole
really that long, just FYI. It's like a page.
I know they could have been longer, to be honest, but anyway, let's go back to the publication piece because I know we didn't finish the whole thing. You remember when in your blog post you talk about how you had to write telegraph first?
Oh yeah, I never even got to that. Yes. So
I got naughty and
yeah, so I couldn't find anyone to buy it in 2014, and I went around looking for an editor who I thought would not be afraid of lesbian sexuality. and I was like, oh, there's this guy Andrew Carr. he had a reputation for publishing edgier YA. So I asked my agent at the time to submit this to him, and he was interested in it, and we had a talk about it even in 2014 or 2015. And he told me about what his editorial vision was. And I remember he said that he felt the manuscript at the time was like a photograph. It was nicely composed, but I needed to enhance it. I needed to increase the contrast in certain ways. And that was really interesting to me because there was no photography in the first draft of this book. I mean, the one that he read. But his conversation with me had a huge impact on the way I started thinking about the art that is depicted in the book. So Joan, Aria's grandmother, is an artist. And so I was very hopeful that Andrew would buy it, but he couldn't buy it. He couldn't do it. So he asked me if I had a different idea. And that's when I came up with the idea for a psychological thriller called A Line in the Dark, which I then wrote and has just been re-released with a new cover just in time for Halloween. So check it out. So I wrote A Line in the Dark, and then I had the idea for Last Night at the Telegraph Club, and Andrew wanted to buy that. By this time it was early 2017. Okay. And I thought that this book was dead. I was like, this is never going to get published. I put it on a shelf, but Andrew said he also wanted to buy A Scatter of Light. And I was very surprised. And I wanted to do it because even though I was trying to let go of it, I had not really let go of it. So I was like, yes, let's do it. But then we agreed that I should do Telegraph Club first because, again, it was January 2017, basically. Trump was being inaugurated. It seemed like Last Night at the Telegraph Club would have contemporary resonance, even though it was set in the 50s. There were all these parallels with what was happening in regular life at the time. So I decided to do that one first. Unfortunately, I'm a very slow writer. It took me like 4 years to write it. So it didn't come out until after Trump left. But
it was a celebration. Yay.
Yes, yay. But when I finished writing Telegraph Club, I started revising this one. And during the writing process of writing Telegraph Club, I realized that these two books were connected. So when I went back to revise A Scatter of Light, I then was able to weave those threads back in the book.
Very, very happily. I was so happy with that. Has anybody read it yet? Oh, wasn't that so beautiful? See, everybody who hasn't read it yet, we're not going to spoil it for you, but it's so good. I loved it. So let's talk about the timeline between Aria's story and Lily's story, because I'm really interested in how you think Lily and Kath would have, reacted if at Aria's age, being, in contemporary times in 2013 with everything that was happening. Like, how would they react?
Well, they would be different people.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing about Telegraph Club is it is 1954 in San Francisco. So they have their life there. And if they were in 2013, I think they would be totally different people.
Like Lily's personality, though.
I think Lily would have known that she was gay sooner. Probably because, like Steph, she might have been bit torrenting the L word when she was 13. So I think I mean Kath already knew she was gay. In Telegraph Club, she knew this. So Kath also would have known. So maybe they wouldn't have had to sneak out to a lesbian bar. And also they wouldn't have been able to get into a lesbian bar in 2013 because now we have these IDs that have like holograms on them. In 1954, it was literally a piece of paper with like your name typed on it. So they could easily fake it, but they would not have been able to get into a lesbian bar. But they could have gone to their like high school pride club. You know, they probably would like agitate or organize for like a gay prom. They could do that.
Would they have been friends with Arya?
Would they have been friends with Arya? Lily would definitely, because they're both interested in science and astronomy. Yeah. And I don't know who Kath would be. I don't know. I don't think would Kath go for Arya? I don't know.
Would she be friends with Mel and Lisa?
Yeah. Well, Mel and Lisa are slightly older than them, so they wouldn't be in school together, right?
Right. But I think that's one of the things you do. I mean, you have friendships that cross ages.
Right.
So
yeah, I think Kath is a little more socially outgoing than Lily. This is very weird talking about them like they're real people.
But that's how we feel when we read them.
Yeah.
Isn't that how we feel about that? Yeah, we're invested. So we want more info from your brain.
We're up here writing some fan fiction about Telegraph Club set in 2013.
Exactly. Anyway, all right. So enough fan fiction then. How about let's see here. Your love letter to California. I really felt like this book really was just an ode to how like glorious California was, and the In-N-Out burger, which I really wanted to eat at 2 a.m. after I finished. I think setting can be just as much a star as the characters, and I think you did that here. How was writing that for you? Because you were still in California when you started writing.
Yeah. I lived in Marin County for about 6 years. Yes. Time. I don't know what time is really. Was I really there? Or, I don't know. So you might be curious. You might find it interesting to know that when I started writing this book in 2013, it was not set in California. It wasn't. Arya was originally from Connecticut, which I don't know anything about Connecticut. I don't know why she was from Connecticut. It makes no sense. And she spends the summer in Colorado, which is where I grew up. But when it came time to revise it, the pandemic was going on. So I was like, well, I can't go do any location research in Connecticut or Colorado. So I guess I'm gonna have to set it in places that I know. So now Arya's from Massachusetts, where I live, and she spends the summer in Marin, where I also used to live. So it was funny because those choices I think were very good, because Connecticut and Colorado did not make sense. But it really started to come alive when I moved it physically to places that I did know better, because then I really like to write with a strong sense of place. And I think that allows the book to come alive for me, because I can put the people in those places. I can see them there. And it also, putting it in Marin and in the Bay Area, allowed me to write about San Francisco and Marin and have her do all these gay things in San Francisco that I'd also done. So that was really fun.
And it makes sense. 2013, that was a big year.
Yeah. But that was actually coincidental that stuff happened then. Because when I started thinking about this book, that hadn't really, it wasn't meant to be set in 2013. It was, what's interesting is my editor actually said to me when we started the revision, he's like, why don't we just leave it in 2013? Because then you won't have to deal with the pandemic. Because I was revising it during the pandemic, and I thought I would bring it up to whatever year we were in at the time, 2019 and 2020.
Mhm.
And I was like, what am I going to do about the pandemic? And Andrew said, you should just leave it in 2013, because also that's when Prop 8 was overturned. So there were these kind of coincidental historical events that really were very useful to the story of the book.
We can't quite call it historical fiction, although I heard that it's historical if there are people who have been born after he can read, then it is historical. But
if you're what, how old would you be? 9?
yeah,
If you're 9 years old, this is historical fiction.
This is historical fiction, but it actually, you placed it right during one of the most important periods of time for LGBTQ in the community, right? You were there. Like, let's talk about that a little bit, because we saw a little of the celebration in the book.
Well, the funny thing is, I lived in the Bay Area, but when the decision came down in June, I was not in San Francisco. My wife and I were in Cornwall on a writer's retreat.
Oh,
Well, my wife wasn't writing, and honestly, I wasn't writing either. I was like being a tourist in Cornwall while my friends were writing. And but we knew that it would happen. And I was sitting in the kitchen, and I haven't told you this. I don't know, probably maybe Cammie knows this. But anyway, when I was sitting in the kitchen, my wife came over to me and got down on one knee and gave me a diamond. And asked me if I would marry her, which is so funny because we'd already been married. Okay. Like we did a domestic partnership when that was legal. Then we did a wedding, like a fake wedding when it wasn't legal. And then in 2013, she proposed to me the day of the decision. And then we came back to San Francisco and we got married at City Hall in August of 2013.
that's beautiful. See, if we dig hard enough, these little nuggets come out. Oh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah, it was really sweet. I was totally surprised because she had bought this before the decision and brought it with us to Cornwall.
Wow.
And I'm very impressed. She did not tell me a thing. She is a privacy attorney, so she's very good at not revealing anything.
I was an attorney also, but something like that, I'd be like, I'm not, no poker face. So. Okay, let's see here. I asked that question already. Okay. This is the question we were talking about earlier, right? That you created a book within a book. I mean, that's how her brain works. She's like on a genius level writer where she is writing something in the book that becomes the symbol of the book. I'm messing this up. Take over, please.
Okay, so in the book, one of the storylines is Aria coming to understand that she's interested in creating art, like her grandmother, Joan. Joan is a photographer and an abstract artist. So Joan paints and makes photographs, and she's also working on another art project that Aria doesn't know what it is, and Joan won't tell her. So during the summer, Aria starts to paint. She's kind of bored. She doesn't know what she's doing in California. She's going to MIT in the fall. She's going to be she wants to be an astronomer like her grandfather, but she's never really thought about art. Although when she was a child, her grandmother would, of course, have her do art projects at home, and paint at home, but she kind of never gave it much thought. But during this summer, when she realizes that she is very attracted to her grandmother's gardener staff, all of these new things are happening to her, and she's like, maybe I'll paint this painting. So she starts working on this painting in the book. And okay,
Without spoiling.
at the end of the book, the painting has transformed. Okay, she has worked on the painting for a while and it has become a different thing, but she still sees some of the traces of the earlier painting. She can see them, even if like a regular person looking at it might not see it. And when I was writing this last scene, I wrote it at the end I didn't know what it was really going to be. And I realized what had happened is me putting the way I feel about this book into this book, because when I see this book, I can still see the first draft in it. Like I still see the earliest sentences I wrote. I still sometimes feel like, oh my God, is this terrible? Like, is anyone going to understand what I mean? Should I have done that? I can still see that in the finished product, even though it is transformed. And any regular reader like you is not going to have any idea which sentences are from the original draft and which came last. You guys won't know, but I know, and so for me, this book is many different layers, like many different layers of paint on a painting. I know what's underneath the top, and so there's this metaphor that goes through the book so to go back to your first question about are there any real people in it, it's interesting because although there aren't really, there is my experience of making this book in the way that Aria explores making art. And this is not something I did on purpose. Like I didn't know I was doing this.
Subconscious.
I didn't know I was doing this, but I do want to give credit to my editor, who is actually the genius, because I write stuff and then he'll ask me to explore something more or to bring out this thing more or to go in this direction or that direction, because somehow he can interpret my subconscious and guide me into making a much more impactful metaphorical statement. So I wouldn't put it past him. Maybe he saw it coming. I don't know.
Two geniuses working together, making beautiful products. This is what it is. Honestly, like when we were talking about this before and she said that, I was like that cartoon character, light bulb, and just it felt so beautiful. And it really is a fitting expression of what I thought was the experience of the book for me.
That's really good. That's great. That's what I wanted. Yay. So now you will all know you're supposed to have this experience when you get to the end. So just make sure you have that. Okay.
Because she told you to. Remember this. All right. Well, that was all my questions. We have to open.
Oh, we can open it up.
Yeah. Let's open it up for questions. Anybody? I will pass you the mic. Be shy. Yes. Oh, okay.
So the question was, what about the title? Will it become clearer when you read the book? Yes. And where did the title come from? So light scattering is a phenomenon of physics. So Aria is really interested in astronomy. Her grandfather's an astronomer. And during the summer, one thing she does is she discovers this series of videotapes of his lectures. He's a professor at Berkeley, or he was before he died. And so she starts watching his videotape lectures on astronomy. And one of the lectures is about light scattering. So here's an example of this. So when the sun rises and sets, the sun seems red, right? But the sun is not actually red. It's red. The sun is actually all colors of the light spectrum. And if you were in space, the sun would appear white. White is all colors. So on Earth, it appears red because when light travels through the atmosphere, colors such as blue and green are scattered away due to the atmosphere and various particles in the atmosphere. So it looks red to us because all the other colors have been scattered away. And so red is what remains in our eyes, but it's not actually red. So anyway, it is explained in the book several times. And also at the end of the book, Aria advises, and I will advise you this too, don't take it too literally. Don't try to think too hard about it.
See, the reason it takes so long for Malinda to write these books is because she got her master's in physics before she went on to write it.
No, I didn't. It's sad. I probably should have, because I had to answer this question earlier today on a virtual event, and I ended up just reading the section of the book that explains it, because I was like, how am I going to explain it? So actually, it was very good practice for me to be able to tell you now.
Questions? Yes. Such a good question.
The question is about how I organize my research, and when do I know to stop and write. So I organize my research with a variety of online tools that are constantly changing, because none of them are perfect. Currently, I'm trying to use Evernote. This is a very literal answer. The thing is, so when I wrote Telegraph Club, which was set in the 1950s, I knew nothing about the 1950s when I sold that book. And as soon as I sold it, it happened very quickly. I realized, oh my God, now I have to learn about the 1950s. So I researched for a year that book. I researched the 50s. Generally, I researched queer history from the 1950s, also Chinese American history from the 1950s. I did that for a year. I did archival research. I went to San Francisco and listened to interviews on audio tape at the GLBT Historical Society. I looked at yearbooks from Galileo High School from the 1950s. It was really fun. And I am a research nerd and a dropout from grad school, so I could do research forever.
So how did you learn to stop? Because that's the hardest part.
I knew I had to stop because I had a book contract and I really had to start writing it, or else it would never be done. So but I continued to research throughout the entire time I wrote that book. I was researching through page proofs. So page proofs are when the book is set so that it by the typesetter in the computer, so it looks like a page. I was researching all the way to the very end. I researched after the book came out because there were some errors and we had to fix them. So yeah, there was
4 years wasn't long enough.
No. So A Scatter of Light, thankfully, was just set in 2013. So I didn't have to do as much research, but I did actually watch 23 lectures about astronomy on this online course. That's how I got the idea to give Aria's grandfather these videotapes. So I did watch a lot about astronomy, but I never finished the astronomy course. So I only got through part of it. And now I don't know the other. I don't know. I only did like half a course. So
how many pages did that amount to in the book, though, if you think about it?
Like half a page.
Yeah. See, I just wanted to point that out. But it was worth it, goddammit.
It's the title. I have to learn all about this. You've both written across multiple genres, Ellen, you've written across multiple categories. I'm curious as to whether your writing process is the same regardless of genre category, if you're just tackling a book, or if it's different.
You first.
It's
the Malinda show. First, Malinda.
I know you. Yes. That's right. I was like the mask, but I know your voice. Robin Talley, author of many novels, is right here. What was the question? Because I kept trying to figure out, I know you. I had a question for both of you, which is you've written across a lot of different genres. Your writing process is different. Oh yeah. For me, every single book, I have to learn how to write that book because I'm an idiot and I write a different genre every time. So I have to figure out what that genre demands. Every genre has readers go into reading like a science fiction novel or a mystery. They want certain things. And if you want to make sure that your book is satisfying to those who are reading it, you have to at least understand what they're expecting. That doesn't mean you're going to give it to them, but you have to kind of know what they're expecting. So I have to do a lot of thinking every time and learn how to write a different genre. But what about you?
That's such a considerate answer on her part. She's considering what you guys are expecting. I do not do that. I'm like, I want to write, violence and death and destruction. And okay, And this like reminds me, my kid on the first book, she's like, "Mom, you can't kill everybody. Nobody will read the rest of your book." I'm like, okay,
So there needs to be some main characters.
that's true. Well, no, she lived.
Oh,
Yeah, no, everybody else died. But I think when I'm writing different genres, I'm always just focused on the story. And I think the only difference is fantasy. Because then when I'm doing fantasy, then I've got my Excel spreadsheet out and I've got my little tabs and it's like rules of the world, timeline, breakdown of chapters. What's the magic that's happening? And I'm like, I get like total anal nerd and that like, when I'm doing fantasy. That's why I don't like doing fantasy anymore. It's too much work.
Fantasy is a lot of work. Like
It's a lot of
you have
work.
to do research to write fantasy too. It's like
Yes.
hard.
It's
And then
you gotta keep yourself in check with
Yes.
fantasy because you have to know everything that's
Yes.
happening.
you have to make up your own physics for fantasy if you have magic in there. So
Mhm.
you have to hold yourself to it.
And you have to remember how that's why I have a tab, rules of the world, because I can't break my own rules. Or can I?
You can, but then people get mad.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. No, but I think that like in writing in different genres, to me, it really just is like, what's the story I'm writing? I'm not really focused on like how it's different. I just finished a zombie book and it didn't feel that much different than writing my historical fiction because they both made me cry trying to write it because it was hard.
It's true.
So-
That is consistent through all writing.
Exactly.
It's always hard and you always want to run away and like never do it again.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you have to keep going because
Mhm.
there are really good parts.
Yes. Usually when I like kill somebody in the book. That for me is very
Ellen likes to
cathartic.
write about murder and violence. That's all her.
It's
too,
my
your
favorite.
books are all very much
Yes.
lovely for children.
Children love my books. I don't know why. No. I actually think that writing all across all the genres is more fun because you're challenging yourself and also you're not putting any like boundaries around you. You know how people like talk about editors who say, well, you only write fantasy, so we only want fantasy books. You don't want to do that. Like we should never be
Publishing wants you to do that.
right, and screw publishing. No, we don't do that. We write what we want to write. What moves us.
That's definitely me too.
What's
Yeah.
what makes us
Yeah.
passionate. So,
Absolutely.
that's
But do you have a
difference.
favorite genre to write?
Horror.
Or makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
So different genres, and it sounds like maybe the characters in this book you ever think about branching out from hi Ellie. Yes, I do. Oh, the question was, do I think because the characters are a little bit older in this book, do I think about branching out and writing adult? And the answer would be yes. And I'm not saying anything else.
We can surmise something from the not saying anything else part. Ooh, interesting.
They do get older. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, Cammy.
You were you inspired by any parts? And second part, you write so vividly and tangibly about the creative process in the art. Are you interested in experiencing those mediums for yourself, branching out from that?
Yeah. So the question was whether there were any specific artists that I was inspired by for Joan West's work in the book, and whether I am interested in exploring art myself. And the answer to both is yes. So Joan was certainly inspired by many that I now cannot remember the names of them at all. Thanks. Why does that always happen? Who? It's true. I really can't remember any of them, but I have a whole database of art that I would look at and then that I liked and felt that reflected Joan's work. And there were some photographers and some abstract painters. And I can't believe this. I cannot remember a single one of them.
You need a little cheat note,
Isabel? Yeah. Well, the art in the prologue is inspired by the art of Ruth Asawa, who makes wire sculptures. They're amazing. I literally can't remember a single one of them, and I literally have an entire database of artists. So yeah, that's really not good, Malinda.
Pandemic brain.
Yeah, we'll see. Follow me on social media and I'll share some of this with you later on at a later date. One of the artists in the book that Aria is inspired by is Bernice Bing, who was an abstract expressionist and a lesbian and a Chinese American who lived in San Francisco in the 50s. So sometimes I imagine that she ran into Lily and Kath, which I would find very funny. So Bernice Bing is really wonderful. She's a lesser known abstract artist because I don't know if you know, but abstract expressionism from the mid-century was a very stereotypically masculine genre. You know, it was like, oh God, I can't even remember that guy's name who did the dot, who threw the paint, Jackson Pollock. So everybody thinks of Jackson Pollock as that kind of abstract expressionist art, and it was very, you know, manly. But there were many women who were also painting abstract expressionist paintings at the time, and one of them was Bernice Bing. And I don't remember how I discovered her, but it was very exciting for me to discover her art. As for me, I have taken painting classes. I did one at a meditation retreat once, which was interesting because it wasn't really a class. It was like, we are now going to paint giant mandalas of anything in your subconscious, and we'll do this for a week in silence. And so that was actually an amazingly transformative experience. I've also taken regular painting classes, and they're really fun. I'm not a good painter. I'm like terrible at this. And but it's fun because I don't feel like I have to be good at it. Like with writing, I feel like I have to be good at it. So there's all this pressure. But with painting, I'm just like dabbling. So it's fun. And then during this book, I also took some photography classes. And my editor is a very dedicated photographer. So he actually got me an old camera that uses film that is like the one that Joan uses. And I learned how to use that, and I took some photos, and I just developed some film, not myself, I sent it out, I don't have a dark room. And I was trying to do double exposures, which happen in this book, and they're okay. I mean, they're not fantastic, but they're okay. Anyway, so the answer is yes. Yeah.
Honestly, I want to art so badly. Yeah, but I'm terrible at art. I have to share this one story.
That's why it's fun. You don't have to be good at it.
I know, but I want to be good because, you know, you
Because
go
you're
and you
Asian.
sign. Yes. And also because there's so many illustrators and you're always signing next to illustrators and they're drawing.
Oh, yeah. That's because you do middle grade now. The C and YA, there are no illustrators. We're all
Oh.
terrible at art.
That's true.
So it's fine.
But, you know, I get very jealous when I'm like sitting next to Gene Yang and he's doing Monkey King.
Sit next to him.
They put me next to him. Make me mad. I tried to do a smiley face and the kid said, "What is that?" You had a question.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of creating queer spaces and communities? Can you talk about, I haven't read this in like long time, about the bar and spaces like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So one of the things that, oh, sorry. Hello, virtual audience. I'm very sorry. I keep forgetting to repeat the question. So well, the question is about the importance of queer spaces and how, because there is queer community in Last Night at the Telegraph Club at the bar, and also there is some in this book as well. And the question was about if I could speak about the importance of that in the book. Right, and how I created them. So in these cases, I 100% just stole from my life because I've gone to a lot of lesbian bars. And so even though the bars that I went to were not the ones in Telegraph Club, they were actually in San Francisco. And during the research for Telegraph Club, I did all this research into 1950s bars, and I realized that the ones that I went to basically were in the same buildings. Like the architecture was the same. You would still go through a door, walk past a very long bar where the bartender and everyone sitting there would look at you, and then you'd go past that gauntlet of people staring at you and checking you out, and you go into this back room where there was like dancing or like a stage for performance. And I went to there were several bars in San Francisco that I went to that still had that same exact layout. And I realized that the queer community that I was part of inherited those spaces from the queer people who lived there in the 50s and created them. And that was an incredible feeling of connection for me. And I definitely put my feeling about the community into that book. And so for this one as well, Aria starts to hang out with a group of women who are friends with each other. They have their own group of their own queer community. It's in 2013, and she starts going to various things with them, like the Dyke March and Pride and parties. And I have also been to the Dyke March, Pride, and parties. So I definitely took some of those experiences and put them into this book. Honestly, they go to a party in this book in the Mission, and it's basically set at my friend's house where we had a lot of parties. So that part is easy. I steal locations all the time. Yeah. I had no idea that's what it means. I didn't have any idea. Her name is Aria because her mother is an opera singer, and her mother named her after the word aria because she's a soprano and she sings arias.
I just made that connection. And I love opera. Oh.
That's fantastic. I did not know that.
Other question?
I forgot to repeat the question. The question was you said that the word aria in Italian means air. Okay. And you asked if that was a deliberate choice on my part. And I said, no, I had no idea. And it's named after the word aria for something that a soprano sings. That was my recap.
Very good. Ooh. What are you reading? What are you currently reading?
I just read a book for blurbing, and it's fantastic. And I don't know if I'm sure I can say it. It's the new book by E.B. Zoboy.
Okay.
It's coming out next year, and I think it is called, God, I can't remember the name of the book. This is terrible.
I think I remember.
Nigeria Jones.
That's it.
It's called Nigeria Jones, and it's great. It's about this Black girl and her. It's about grief and coming of age. It's set in Philadelphia, and it's wonderful. The voice is amazing.
Mm-hmm. I just read this amazing book called Scatter of Light. It's just so fantastic. I encourage all of you to read it. Don't miss it. So good.
I bet it's available for sale here.
It is. Yeah. Are we all done then? Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions.
Thank you, everyone. So we are now going to transition to our signing line. And if you all wouldn't mind putting up your chairs and setting them to the side, if you don't already have a copy, we have copies on our table over there that you can grab, have our author sign, and then purchase them on your way out. Thank you all so much for joining us.